Hello Tesla cats, this is Tesla-chan, or Lucy if you'd prefer, and welcome back to the garden. Happy New Year, by the way. How are you guys doing? I hope you're doing well in this current day and age. And let me just ask you, where are my Hetalia fans at? I ask this because of the fact that today's video is going to be me reading a fan fiction that I created back in this past year, in October. If I'm being more specific, October 12th, 2024. With that said, I'm mainly going to be putting this up as something to tide people over until I put up a newer video that has me drawing my Toonsona again. And I apologize because there are lots of those on this channel. But I promise that this should be the final update of that character. And it will cover a lot of things and not just the update and the storyline behind the Toonsona. With that said, I hope you'll stick around and enjoy. I will be linking all variations, or rather, all places I have posted this first chapter, aka the prologue, to the story down in the description. So if you'd like to read along, by all means do. So, stick around, and I hope you enjoy. Silly Tesla, you forgot to issue a warning for this fanfiction. Haha. Joking aside, I am going to give you my version of an author's note for this video. So yes, you are not required to read the author's note that I wrote at the beginning of this fanfiction. If you already have, okay, cool. That's fine. With that being said, let's explain what I need to. First off, this is a Hetalia fanfiction, and it does ship Nyotalia with Hetalia in Self-Cessed, which is probably one of the most gross descriptions I could think of because of the fact that even the guy who created them actually said they're not from the same universe, so shrug. But I digress. It is self-cessed, it's not the main thing, and it takes a lot of headcanons from stuff that my friend and I used to roleplay all the time back when we both started really getting into anime, and back when I really got her into anime. And I wouldn't have gotten into anime without somebody else's help, but I'm not really close with that person anymore. With that being said, if you're reading along, yes, I do have accented words, or I have accented words rather, by changing letters to make it sound or feel more like the character. I want to try to immerse people in the characters and who they're reading and what they're reading. And in that same vein, I'm going to be trying to read in that same type of voice. And I'm going to try to read it softly and try to keep this stuff chill. But I make no promises. I am not perfect. I am not a professional voice actor. I'm still fumbling with the technology aspect of recording videos as it is. I don't write scripts for videos. So you can kind of see where I'm coming from here. With that being said, I also have put a key at the bottom of the fanfictions, I believe. I don't think I did it for this chapter, though, for the characters. But for this particular chapter, let's just keep in mind that you have Elizabeth. Let's keep in mind, let me restart that. Let's keep in mind that this chapter mainly focuses on male and female Prussia, male and female Germany. I think you have a cameo, a brief cameo, with either male or female England. And so I'll just really quickly run down the character names that I've picked. Maria Julchen Beldeschmidt for female Prussia, and Gilbert Beldeschmidt for male Prussia. Monika Beldeschmidt for female Germany, and Ludwig Beldeschmidt for male Germany. Elizabeth Kirkland for female England, and Arthur Kirkland for Male England, Amelia F. Jones for Female America, and Alfred F. Jones for Male America. I wanted to run that by you guys real quick. That being said, at the beginning of every chapter, I'm going to try, if I think something is super dark and I don't want to... In fact, there is a bit of a dark moment that happens in this chapter, so trigger warning for those who have dealt with people who have been abusive to them, because I feel like that is the best way to describe at least the situation to a certain extent that I have. I will not be going out of my way to necessarily make historical jokes or anything like that. And if I bring up historical moments in the fan fiction, I have made sure to do research for certain things, but I'm not deep diving into history as far as this fan fiction, because that's just not my thing. I'm not one of the people who's written historical fan fictions, and I don't even cover full-on places in different countries, even in this fan fiction. So I am open to suggestions, place descriptions, etc., and even just some general feedback on this video and future videos in this series. With that being said, sorry for the long ramble and for this additional bit of information. Let's dive right in. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you at the end. Welcome to Hetalia x Nyotalia, Spins and Roundabouts. Have you ever experienced deja vu? How about dreams about somebody you knew at one point or another? This is where things started off for the countries. The question is, how will they end? Prologue Part 1. A Day in the Life of a Lost Country. It's been almost a month since the Chancellor told him he would need to stay home, Ludwig thought annoyedly. And if he hadn't left in a huff, he would know the reason. He had had enough of Gilbert pouting the entire time, keeping him distracted from doing his work. Ludwig had been worried about him since the meeting with their leader, and Gilbert had been pissed about not being able to go to this very specific world meeting. He's being walked up the stairs to talk to Gilbert, needing to explain the weird reason for him not being able to go. Ludwig was running out of time to complete his work before that meeting, too. Ludwig sighed as he knocked on the door. Gilbert opens. That's enough! Ludwig boomed, marching over to his older brother. That's enough, Bruder. I fought for you to be allowed to go too, and I'll be damned if I hear that out of you again. An icy stare passed between the two of them briefly. Gilbert had been struggling since his nation dissolved, and he came back from death. And he still had a habit of commenting on it, despite Ludwig and the other nations trying to remind him that he still had a place among them. Gilbert sighed, breaking eye contact with Ludwig before Ludwig spoke up again, his heart rate decreasing. Their reasoning was to have someone protecting things while the other one was away at the meeting. Ludwig then added with an agitated sigh, And no, I don't think it makes any sense. They let Lovino go with Feliciano, and I fought for you to come too, but they wouldn't budge. Gilbert found himself looking at Ludwig as he spoke, a soft but annoyed smile crossing his lips. Yeah, I know the Chancellor would be breathing down both of our necks if this was any other meeting. Don't get yourself cornered, it's fine, he said, patting Ludwig on the shoulder as he walked past him to head downstairs to the kitchen. Besides, you're right, I haven't done any of my awesome cooking in a while. Like when you almost burned down the house, Ludwig called after him with a joking grin. Gilbert looked back at Ludwig with a playfully hurt expression. That was one time, Vest! One time! And it has never happened again. Besides, I thought the fire was fun to you. Just don't repeat those events again, yeah, Ludwig called jokingly, laughter filling the air between them. Ludwig headed downstairs as Gilbert replied to the earlier joke question by saying, Burn down the house. Got it. 9! Ludwig yelled back before heading into the library to start and finish his work for the world meeting. Gilbert laughed, half wanting to continue the joke as he pulled things out of the fridge to make dinner, but he ultimately decided not to. He really didn't know how far behind Ludwig was and thought it would be best just to let him work until dinner was finished. He didn't even tease him when he came back into the kitchen a few minutes later to feed the dogs. Though that being said, he did note his brother's stern gaze after he left shortly after. "Yeah, I know," Gilbert muttered under his breath, combing his fingers through his hair. "Don't feed the dogs table scraps. Not like you don't already do that yourself." Then, when the dogs had finished eating, they came over to beg for food while he was cooking. Gilbert still slipped them pieces of sausage or cheese, with the Doberman, Aster, and the German Shepherd, Blackie, stopping after just a short bit, once Gilbert told them no more. That just left the Hovart, Berlitz. He continued to follow Gilbert around, begging, but not incessantly. "You're not getting any more if they aren't," Gilbert replied when Berlitz whined and tried doing a cute puppy face. Berlitz huffed a little, but he seemed to back off after Gilbert said no again. Though he did lick his hand, the one that he had bit all that time ago. Gilbert then watched him go over to play with the other two. A soft smile crossed his face. "But so focused that he hasn't let you guys outside after dinner," Gilbert muttered, letting them out, and secretly telling Gilbert to watch them for a moment. Gilbert cheered, heading out excitedly before Gilbert went back inside. "Ludwig, dinner's ready!" he called out into the house. His call was met with silence. Gilbert sighed, walking back towards their bedrooms. "Vest, dinner! You wouldn't let me avoid eating!" Again, silence followed. "How much work did you fall behind on?" Gilbert muttered before continuing to call it to Ludwig. It was when he got into the library and he saw stacks of paperwork and journals and Ludwig sitting in the middle. "Ludwig?" Gilbert spoke to his brother, again met with silence. "Vest!" Ludwig suddenly jolted, looking up at Gilbert, much to Gilbert's relief. "Oh, is dinner ready?" he asked, suddenly seeming to realize the time. "Yeah, I've been calling you for a while," Gilbert replied, looking at Ludwig with a look that he almost rarely pulled. "But how far behind are you exactly, Vest?" Ludwig became slightly flustered, his cheeks tinging pink as he answered, "You were holed up in your room for a month. I was worried, so pretty far behind." Gilbert began to chuckle, earning a glare from his younger brother. His glare was enough to halt his laughter, but not before swiping away a tear at the situation. Sorry. I just didn't expect you to get soft on my account." "We almost lost you once," Ludwig suddenly, surprisingly admitted, running his hand through his partially slicked-backed blonde locks. "I didn't want to lose you again, due to being hurt and not telling me because you were pissed." Gilbert noticed the change in mood. As the day Berlitz bit him, they didn't realize it would do him in, let alone that he would come back by some crazy miracle. The second chance would have felt like a fluke to most, but to them and their friends, it was a blessing. His ability to regenerate had been much slower now, and for all he knew, tomorrow could be the day his last breath was drawn. Gilbert knew that might still be ages down the line at this point, but he was still grappling with how this had affected others and not just how it affected him. He smirked, returning to his typical expression. "Stop being so sappy, Vest. I would have gotten over it. Moreover, it seems like we have a lot of work to do tonight and over the next week." Ludwig looked over a bit surprised, not only by Gilbert's response, but also by the fact that he didn't have to encourage him to help for once. "Yeah," Ludwig smiled, looking back at the work briefly. Gilbert sighed, placing a hand on his brother's shoulder. That stuff won't be going anywhere, he said, a smirk on his face. And we won't be able to focus if we're hungry. You need to stop sounding like that stupid American, Ludwig joked, standing up and walking past Gilbert. Gilbert then turned to catch up, laughing a little bit as he retorted, Oh, like you did back in World War II? Oh yeah, because someone was too awesome and would have been figured out right away, Ludwig answered, slightly annoyed, but able to laugh at the situation at this point. Yeah, see, you get it, Gilbert replied, catching up. Ludwig rolled his eyes, a small smile crossing his face. You have absolutely no common sense, Bruder. Says the guy who got so sappy that he fell behind on a month's worth of paperwork, Gilbert replied with a vibrant, teasing grin. Ludwig retaliated, half playfully, by punching him in the head, to which Gilbert laughed. Ow. Did you let the dogs out? Ludwig asked, as they finally made their way into the kitchen to grab dinner. Yeah, Gilbert answered. Gilbert is with them. Want me to call them back in? Ja, danke, Ludwig answered. Bitte, Gilbert replied. The two of them then ate dinner, and afterwards, Ludwig took Aster, Blackie, and Berlitz out for a walk. And after all of that, the two brothers finally focused on the paperwork for their next world meeting. Not only was this the first meeting in a long, long time that Gilbert was told to stay home, but it was also about more than typical geopolitical matters. Things had been strange. From events seeming to be tied to one group that every country had never interacted with until now, to dreams that seemed to be about people from each nation's past. And said dreams weren't even about long since dead but important historical figures, but rather people who weren't noticed or noted in the history books, but held close bonds with each and every one of them in some capacity or another. The dreams often went as followed. Calm and relaxed conversation, usually positive. An event leading up to one or the others, or even both of their deaths, or an argument that seemed to crop up from nowhere with that same person. Stranger still, all dreams seemed to take place in the current time period, and they couldn't quite see their friend's face in the dream. With the group that had suddenly cropped up seeming to claim that their death specifically would be a blessing, improvement, or noble sacrifice, the world's leaders had moved up the world meeting in a hurry. So all notes on their dreams were critical, and any information on the group from each country was highly valued. This, on top of having to discuss typical geopolitical issues, made this meeting massively important. So, throughout the remaining week, Gilbert and Ludwig came up with a schedule, one in which both got very little sleep, but were able to complete the work and organize it all. On the day that Ludwig was set to leave, he seemed to continually check everything, from where his notes were and if he had them all, to whether or not his bag was packed completely for the meeting that would most likely last a month, if not longer. It was when he began to check it again that Gilbert spoke up. Vest! You've got everything. And you've got this. Ludwig sighed, smiling tensely as he responded, Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I've got everything. And I want to get this right, considering the circumstances. Gilbert smiled, understanding where he was coming from. We were on a bit of a time crunch, Gilbert admitted, swinging his arm around his brother's shoulder. But we did everything we could. So that's all you can do, is what you can. With that being said, pretty sure we nailed it. Ludwig laughed, happy to see at least one of them was optimistic about the situation. Then something crossed his mind that he'd only just thought of, so he turned to Gilbert and said, I want you to promise me something, though. Gilbert looked over, his smile barely wavering as he replied, What? Please, get out of the house for yourself. And no, I don't mean just when you walk the dogs. I mean for yourself. What? Gilbert balked, half joking. I was looking forward to reading and staying inside all day. Gilbert, I mean it. For my sake, just go outside and do something for yourself. Anything for yourself, Ludwig replied annoyedly, shaking his head at Gilbert's answer. Before Gilbert could retort, the car that was coming to pick Ludwig up began to beep outside. Gilbert knew that if he didn't promise to at least try, that Ludwig would run late. A soft sigh escaped his lips, just knowing that this stubbornness came from him, somehow. All right, Gilbert replied calmly. I will try. And that is all I can ask for, Ludwig said, before picking up his bags. I'll keep you up to date on the meeting. After all, you've been experiencing the same crap we have, Ludwig replied, pausing at the door. You'd better vest, Gilbert teased. Now get going, you don't need to get in trouble. Germany smirked, heading out the door, leaving silence behind him as the door closed. Gilbert's smile dropped briefly, still annoyed that their leader was making him stay home. He was about to mindlessly pick out a book to read when he heard the whining of Aster, Berlitz, and Blackie. He was about to laugh and ask the three dogs if they'd already been fed, when he realized that they hadn't yet. The two of them had been so focused on getting things packed for the meeting that even Germany had forgotten to feed them. Gilbert began to laugh hard. Neither of them had been this distracted in ages, and it was hard to believe that Ludwig had lost track of the dogs before leaving. Berlitz barked, seeming to be a bit miffed at the situation, while Aster and Blackie growled a little out of annoyance. Sorry, Gilbert replied amidst his own laughter. I'll feed you and walk you, all right? He made his way to the kitchen, making sure to feed Gilbert along the way, and he fed all three dogs. When he set down the food for Berlitz, he noticed him looking at his hand again, before giving it a gentle lick. The other two were happily eating away, but Berlitz looked nervous. Hey, what's wrong? Gilbert asked, noticing Berlitz looking at him intently. What made this behavior more odd is the fact that he looked as though he was in major trouble for something. After a brief staring match, Berlitz seemed to lick the hand he bit all that time ago, before whining. Gilbert smiled softly, his question from before seeming to be answered right before his eyes. He knelt down to be closer to Berlitz's level, and lifted the hand he'd been licking on and off since he'd come back. Berlitz sniffed it just before Gilbert began to pet him, causing the black and orange Hoavart to lean into his touch. It's okay, yeah, Gilbert said with a gentle smile. You were worked up, and I should have known better. You're a good boy, Berlitz, and I'm not mad at you. Berlitz looked at Gilbert excitedly, barking a little before licking him to death. Gilbert laughed, not noticing Gilbert trying to get him to stop, or the fact that the other two had joined in as a thank you. Okay, goofball, stop. Please go eat, Gilbert begged through laughter. The three dogs finally stopped and went back to their bowls, while Gilbert giggled and picked himself up to go get their leashes. Gilbert landed on his shoulder shortly after, seeming to be in a bit of a huff, causing Gilbert to smirk. You're not being replaced by those three, you know that's right. Gilbert chirped, seeming to relax a little as Gilbert went back to the kitchen to leash up the three dogs. With that, they left the house, and seemed to go off without a hitch. Gilbert would occasionally hide out on Gilbert's shoulder, when bigger birds were trying to seek him out, but everyone seemed satisfied. In the days that followed, Gilbert adjusted to the new schedule, seeming to find time for everything. He would even find time to train and read a book or two during the day. By the time a couple weeks had passed like this, Gilbert hadn't heard anything from his brother, and he tended to chalk that up to the fact that he was busy. He was right, of course, as when the last night of the second week rolled around, Gilbert finally got a call from his brother. His phone began to ring off the hook. Gilbert was really tired and had only just started to pass out when it started. He groaned, finally picking up the phone when Gilbert began to get mad. Yeah, so enthusiastic, Ludwig joked on the other side of the phone. So sorry, is it late? Oh, fast, Gilbert exclaimed in a hushed tone. Do you want to talk on the computer? Gilbert is asleep. Yeah, just curious, did I wake him first then? But Ludwig asked. All the while, Gilbert was tripping over clothes he hadn't put in his hamper yet. Plus, Berlitz, Blackie, and Aster were sleeping on his floor to keep him company. Yeah, thankfully you didn't wake the dogs, he admitted, grabbing the laptop he had on his desk before stalking downstairs to the living room. Wait, they've been sleeping on your floor? In your room? Ludwig asked, kind of surprised, as they usually didn't sleep in his room, but rather outside his door. Yeah, ironically enough, Gilbert said while biting his lip, trying to start up his computer. I think that they were worried about me. And to be fair, there have been some new developments. Just as he said this, the computer turned on. Almost instantly, it booted up. I'll call you back, Vist. Gilbert heard his brother halfway. Knowing that he understood, he switched over to video call. As soon as Ludwig picked up on the computer, he asked, What's this about new developments? Gilbert laughed nervously. Yeah, the dreams have been getting more vivid. And I had a pretty violent one recently. That, and I've been followed home during the dog walks. Ludwig took notes, a concerned look crossing his face as he did. That's not good, he muttered. And I'm sorry to ask you this, but do you feel comfortable telling me the details of the violent dream? Gilbert could feel his body go rigid and began to feel incredibly cold. Yeah, he spoke hesitantly. It's just a lot. You don't have to, his brother answered. Some of the others haven't been able to either. Prussia shook off his remaining hesitation. Considering it's the first really violent one I've had, it feels wrong not to say anything. Germany gave him a bit of a concerned look, but he nodded. Prussia closed his eyes, not really wanting to remember, but hoping that it would clear his mind enough to do so. He recounted the fact that he and his childhood friend were running away from shadowy beasts that seemed to have bones sticking out from under their skin. The two of them had been fighting about how the other was supposed to run. It was when she was about to argue again that one of the creatures grabbed her, and then him. The pain seemed to be twofold, as if the injuries dealt to her affected him just as bad as his own. He watched her scream and writhe in agony and pain as he called out her name, and began begging those things to stop. The things that stuck out the most, he finished in a cold sweat, gripping his shoulders, were the ways that we shared pain and the fact that we seemed to know what was going on. The creatures too, though. So damned violent. Blood everywhere. The darkness in the living room made him feel increasingly alone. Gilbert, Ludwig said in a dead serious tone, snapping him from his fear. You won't be, and aren't, going to be facing this alone. Gilbert smiled wryly, seeming to try to hide the remaining fear. Felt too real, right? Ludwig asked, earning a slight nod from Gilbert. Yeah, that sounds about right. Ludwig added, earning a slight laugh from Gilbert. And being followed? Ludwig followed up the prior line of questions. Gilbert smiled, nodding. Very obvious tale. They weren't trying to hide it. Scare tactics? Ludwig asked. And appearances. Gilbert thought for a moment before answering. Average looking, so they did appear to be rather cold. Pale-skinned and almost sickly looking. They had red eyes and black hair. Ludwig wrote down the notes, his face turning a bit pale as he did, and worried. Is that all? He asked, causing Gilbert to nod. The two of them discussed the experiences of the other countries, and even what had been happening as far as the strange group that had shown up out of seemingly nowhere. So you and I are in agreement, Ludwig asked. This plan of this group is a massive long game to accomplish something. We don't know what. They may have been around long before they made themselves known to us. And it's connected to our dreams, but for now, how they are connected is uncertain. Gilbert nodded. From the sounds of it, yeah. Well, Ludwig said, that should be helpful moving forward as far as meetings go. Gilbert smiled, swiping his hand under his nose with pride. Yeah, well, at least I could be of help. That said, what have the meetings been running like? Mein Gott, Ludwig whined, earning a fairly loud bit of laughter from Gilbert despite the house's overall silence. And it's not funny! Gilbert tried to catch his breath, not having noticed that Gilbert, Berlitz, Blackie, and Aster had come over to sleep near him on the floor and on the coffee table. They all briefly watched him, having been woken up when he had been terrified earlier, only to fall asleep again once Ludwig had pulled him out of those thoughts. Gilbert annoyedly chirped at him from the coffee table. I thought you said you moved out of your bedroom, Ludwig said as he and Gilbert both heard Gilbert. Gilbert looked around him, seeing the dogs watching him briefly, and Gilbert on the coffee table. I did. They must have followed me downstairs, I guess, he said, wiping away tears of laughter. They're looking out for you, Ludwig replied with a small smile. Yeah, Gilbert answered. You trained them well, and Gilbert has been with me forever now. He seemed to smile a bit too, but then shook off the conversation quickly. He did feel touched that his brother's pets were being protective, though. Sorry, but the meetings? He asked with a soft giggle. Ludwig sighed, running his fingers through his hair, seeming to mess it up a bit. You think the world meetings are bad now? This is arguably the worst one. Gilbert laughed slightly, but allowed for his brother to continue. Between the typical geopolitical matters and the stupid theories on all sides when it comes to the strange events in our nations, no one is getting along. And on top of that, they're all stressed out. So in other words, I might actually get mad at these meetings. Gilbert half laughed. Ludwig nodded, a subtle, annoyed smile crossing his face. Yeah, it's that bad. Gilbert flinched at the thought, but he was glad that Ludwig was able to bear with it. On the note of being annoying, Ludwig said, clearly wanting to change topics, have you been leaving the house? I mean for yourself, not just the dogs. Gilbert smirked, deciding to tease as opposed to directly answering. I don't remember being asked to do that. Ludwig glared at his brother, causing Gilbert to start laughing. You promised, Ludwig scolded, as England, Arthur Kirkland, entered the room behind him. Germany, we need to get back. Arthur spoke up. You can call Prussia again later. Before his brother could pick a fight with England, Gilbert spoke up, cutting the joke short. Vest, I promise to do that tomorrow. Okay? You really need to get back. Ludwig fixed his hair and sighed. "You'd better. Talk to you soon." The laptop screen zapped back to the home screen, and Gilbert sighed. He really didn't want to go out of the house more than he had to, but he knew once he promised stuff to Ludwig, he really couldn't back out. "Damn it, Vest," he muttered. That said, I could visit that one bar. I haven't been there in a while. And I could walk around for a bit before taking the dogs out again. I'll have the time. It might be a nice change of pace." Gilbert yawned, deciding to plan that out more tomorrow. "No need to stay up all night," he whispered tiredly. "I need to get back to sleep." The moment Gilbert stood up, he had his laptop under his arm. Gilbert tiredly fluttered onto his shoulder, and Ludwig's dogs followed him closely. He smiled again at the thought that it wasn't just Gilbert watching him now. "Ja, West dreamed you well. Or is it just that you've noticed the strange people following us? Either way, danke." Gilbert put his laptop back, and as he went to lay down, he fell asleep almost instantly. As he did, he was pulled into another dream. This one was more gentle and seemed to put him at ease. He was down the street from his childhood friend. He hardly recognized her this time, though. She had a small scar on her right cheek, going down from her eye. Her hair looked much longer now, and although she still had her tomboyish personality, she looked to be about his age physically. "Good to see we live on the same street," she laughed, 3 leashes being held in her hand and a small chick on her shoulder. Gilbert wanted to ask her what happened, even remembering her name this time, and how she had changed so much. Though, just like the other dreams, there seemed to be a set script for how he'd reply to her. "Yeah," he laughed. "Surprised we never noticed that before." "Well, during this walk we have a lot of ground to cover. So where do we even start?" she asked, leading the way as he laughed. "For starters, they do seem to get just as excited as my little brooder's dogs," Gilbert laughed. "Should we take the path behind our houses, or the one along the forest edge?" "Let's take the path behind our houses. I haven't done that in a while," she answered, grinning. Gilbert laughed, following as their siblings' dogs interacted with each other, seeming to get along. You haven't changed a bit, Maria," he teased, causing her to look back at him in a mocking, offended way. "Except for the years that have been passing all this time." She then looked forward before adding, "And you still haven't told me why we have the same last name, Gilbert Bellschmidt." "Great minds think alike, I suppose," Gilbert answered, though while he watched this, he was still desperately wanting to break script. "Should we start with what happened, and maybe how we missed each other after the death of old Fritz?" Gilbert asked, noting the sadness on her face. She sighed, nodding before speaking. "We had that huge fight, didn't we? Like, I jumped into the fray to help, and then you got pretty pissed off." Gilbert felt his smile drop as he answered sheepishly, "Yeah, I was just worried. That Arschloch almost killed you. I didn't want to lose another lieber Freund that shortly after. I'm sorry." A long silence passed between them, as if the meeting they had tried to make happen all that time ago was finally happening now. Maria smiled, the sadness fading as she said the next thing in reply. "I'm glad I was wrong. I thought that you hated me. Sorry." Gilbert felt the script about to continue when he seemed to break from it for the first time ever in these dreams. "What's going on?" he asked. Maria didn't seem to look at him weirdly either. Before she could answer, the dream ended with a loud beeping sound. Gilbert's hand slammed the alarm button, turning off the alarm. He couldn't believe how much his dream had changed. Okay, he grumbled, trying to sit up while the dogs were surrounding him in bed. Berlitz whined as he moved. Would you three like to eat? The dogs began to lick him, causing him to laugh. Once he got them to move and fed them and Gilbert, he quickly ran back upstairs to try to write down his most recent dream in his diary. Once he got the page open, though, it was like the dream had completely cleared from his mind. Damn it, he muttered, frustrated. Well, I guess I won't be trying to find any answers yet. Hopefully I can remember that dream later. He walked the dogs and then prepared to go to Schwarzwald Pub, a place that was founded well over a decade ago and had been saved by himself and a few other patrons back in the day. Though life has a funny way of working, as Maria Beldeschmidt was already there. She had been demanded to get out of the house by her sister yesterday and was wanting to meet up with her friend Mein Marchen. She was the current owner of the pub and had been incredibly sweet for as long as she'd known her. After walking Monica's dogs, Berlitza, Luna, and Onyx, it felt like it'd be a nice treat. All right, I'm leaving. Watch the house, you three, she called to her sister's dogs. Marie Bird, do you want to come with? It was almost as soon as she asked that the little yellow chick appeared and landed on her shoulder. The purple bow she had gifted her sat neatly on her head. I guess that answers my question, Maria laughed. A little bit of memory from her dreams still lingered. Oh, yeah, she exclaimed, grabbing the book that she had borrowed off the table. She briefly stared at its cover, wondering why she thought this book might help her, before she started on her way. All the while, she could feel Marie Bird nestling into her long hair. She giggled, knowing that this was in part her pet showing love and affection, and in part her hiding from predators. As she walked, she tended to make more mental notes about those who had been tailing her lately, before they seemed to suddenly disappear. How weird, she said, before she was approached by those she hadn't seen in a while. Every single interaction she had with a person who she hadn't seen in a while felt refreshing. Okay, Vest was right, she thought, smiling. I should have done this before. It was when she got to the bar that it felt like the day was going to be different. Hello, she called kindly, hoping that she wasn't ruining anyone's day. 1 second, called the ginger behind the bar, her face and eyes holding soft, welcoming expressions. Maria smiled in recognition, knowing that Mine was working hard. She just sat down at the bar and waited patiently. As Mine and the staff already knew her and her sister, they didn't make them wait around too much. As soon as she sat down, Mine put her phone down and whipped around to see who called out to her. When she saw it was Maria, her face brightened, and she cheered, Maria, wie geht's es dir? Maria smiled brightly, laughing. Gut. How about you? You look a bit stressed. Mine's smile dropped a little when asked the question, causing Maria to worry a bit. I wish I could say I'm fine, but that's not entirely true, Mine admitted. I've had some issues as of late. Maria could tell that this conversation was going to be important, so she slid a euro note across the bar counter. The usual. Und then fill me in. Mine nodded, smiling kindly before taking the note and beginning to make her drink. Shortly after the exchange began, Mine turned back to talk to Maria when Gilbert walked in the door. The usual, Gilbert? Mine asked kindly. Und also, wie geht's? Haven't seen you in a while. Ja, Gilbert seemed to laugh. Und auf Wiedersehen later. Mine nodded, smiling and giving Maria a subtle expression to let her know that it would take a few extra seconds. Maria nodded, studying the man who had just sat in the back corner of the bar. He had intense purple-red eyes and short white hair. Maria's memory seemed to flicker, making him seem familiar, but she snapped out of it when Mine came back. Sorry, she apologized quickly. He's another really good customer. Nine, Maria spoke up. You still have a job to do. It's fine. Besides, I don't want to cause you trouble. Mine smiled, still looking a bit worn out as she added, Temin, that one customer must be getting to me. Okay, back up a little bit. What customer? Maria asked, a concerned look crossing her face as she took a sip of her drink. This one Arshla keeps coming into the bar lately. Mine stated. Neither her nor Maria had noticed that Gilbert had begun to listen. He'll come to get drinks and then claims that these drinks are crap and that the food is crap, and then he'll start harassing me or other customers to try to get a free meal. Have you called the police? Maria asked, or had him trespassed? That's the thing, Mine trailed off, looking a bit terrified at the prospect. He does all these things, including sexually harass me, and when I've called him out for it or tried to call for help, he'll show up later, whether that's outside my house, or when I'm out with friends, or even before I open. And every time I try, they can't ever find him again to catch him. Both Maria and Gilbert's expressions seemed to darken at this. Neither of them could stand the idea of watching this girl that they've known for years be tormented. Before Maria could state that she would kick his ass, someone else entered the bar. Mine seemed to shrink when they did, and Gilbert, watching the door, saw the guy first. He had blue-green eyes, his hair was sandy blonde-colored, and he was built strong. He looked like he was constantly a mess and wore some grungy-looking clothing. Gilbert was about to stand up to get between Mine and him, but the man had quickly sat at the rustic-looking bar. You talking to this useless nobody over here? The man snarled at Mine before glaring at Maria. For a nobody, Maria said coldly, not allowing Mine to answer him. I am certainly something, scheisse sack. As she took a sip of her beer, the man and Mine both stared at her. The man seemed to be more dumbfounded than Mine was, though, who began to act like she was busy. What did you say? He asked. Oh, hell no! Maria argued, putting her cup down. If you can ask that, you can definitely hear me. The man smiled, though most could tell it was an angry smile. Is that the best a walking corpse can come up with? Is that the best you could come up with? Huh? Maria asked, a sharp tone and a wide smirk on her face. Calling me a walking corpse? The man glared before looking back at Mine with venom. I can do with her, and others, whatever the hell I please. It's not like a pathetic excuse for a dead nation could stop me from killing them. Maria could feel her veins turn to ice as she wondered how he knew who she was, but she shook it off quickly. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, playing dumb. And if you're talking about trying to kill me, I won't go down easy. I do know how to fight. As the guy got ready to hit Maria, Mine got between them, causing the man to hit her instead. Maria and Gilbert caught her and turned towards the man with fire in their eyes. The man began to laugh as he asked, 2 birds with 1 stone, huh? This is just rich. It was as he took a swing at Maria that Gilbert slammed his fist into the guy's face. Maria watched the guy get back to his feet quickly and fake out Gilbert, trying to hit her. Gilbert's eyes went wide as his fist flew towards her. However, Maria was quick enough to not only avoid the hit, but also to grab her cane and hit the man twice in quick succession. The man looked stunned by her movements, as she had also managed to get Mine behind her and Gilbert more fully. Gilbert grit his teeth at the idea that any man would hit a woman like this. Sure, the woman protecting Mine could clearly handle herself, but she shouldn't have to fight someone like this. When the guy charged to knock her over, Gilbert gripped his hands together and slammed them into the man's head. The man fell to the ground, and Maria smiled. "Danke for the save." "Bitte, Fräulein," Gilbert said, giving a dramatic bow. "I'm here to serve." Maria snorted, laughing at the overly exaggerated response. "You're something else," she giggled. "Wie heißt du?" Gilbert smirked, but happily responded, "Ich heiße Gilbert. It's nice to meet you." Mine smiled, watching the two of them interact, as it was them combined with their siblings that had saved her grandfather's old pub, the very pub she now ran herself. When they had finished introductions, Gilbert and Maria turned back towards Mine. Their eyes collectively widened. "Mein Gott, Mine, I'm so sorry," Maria apologized, just before Gilbert could. The two of them helped Mine, all while she laughed a little. Nein, I was just happy to see you two getting along. You two did save this place back in the day." The two of them seemed a bit confused, but shook it off as the man tried to get back up. Gilbert placed his foot on the guy's back and looked towards Maria and Mine. "Maria, could you help Mine with her injuries and call the Polizei?" Gilbert asked, all while glaring holes into the man's back. Maria nodded, speaking up to add, "Call me back up to the frontier if you need any help as far as that is concerned." Gilbert nodded, putting more weight onto the man's back when he tried to move. Once Maria got Mine to sit down in the back room, she started to treat her injuries. The man had managed to give Mine a black eye and a small scratch just a little ways away from her left eye. "How long has he been doing this exactly?" she asked as she treated her injuries. Mine stared at the floor while holding the ice pack. She seemed nervous about divulging that information, but Maria's kind smile gave her the confidence to actually answer. She did manage to get her mouth open when the man yelled from behind the bar, "You think these morons can protect you, you little—" A cracking sound could be heard, followed by an abrupt silence. And after a few more seconds, Gilbert called back to them, "Sorry for the interruption. He'll be quiet again for a while." Maria smiled a bit brighter, but only for a moment when her attention turned back to Mine. Mine was shaking. Hey, Maria exclaimed, in an oddly calming tone. "You don't have to hide. Gilbert and I will protect you. I promise, Mine." Mine smiled nervously, knowing that Maria was being as honest as she could be. "It was about a half year ago now." Maria's eyes widened, not only because this was when the first dream she and her sister had started, but also it was around the same time they had started seeing this strange group and their activities, as far as she knew or could even remember. She shook herself from that thought and said, "That isn't recently. It's been going on for months. Why didn't you say something sooner?" Mine gave a sheepish expression as she tried to figure out how exactly to articulate what her thoughts had been, when the two girls overheard Gilbert asking a regular to call the cops for them. The two of them had completely forgotten to do that in the midst of everything, so the both of them called back up to the front, "Danke, Herr Gilbert!" Gilbert could barely contain his laughter at their gesture as he replied, "Sure thing." The man tried to take advantage of this as he tried to force Gilbert off of his back, saying, "Corpses should never help the living. You zwei could have been the start of something great and bloody. That girl would have been a perfect bait for you, but she had to get in the way. Die verdammte Schlampe. Though she would have been fun to Gilbert had managed to keep the man pinned, but it was the regular, Isaac Gregor, that knocked him out again. His steel-toed boot slamming into the man's face. "Isaac! Mach es ruhig! Wir brauchen ich Band!" Gilbert yelled, causing Isaac to stop before he could swing his foot back again. Isaac glared daggers into Gilbert, his green eyes seeming to pierce through him as he asked Gilbert why. "He's already down. And it's the job of the Polizei to handle him now, Gilbert muttered in a serious tone with a look to match. I know you love her. I know you care about her. But killing this bastard isn't worth it. She doesn't need more to worry about. Isaac seemed to nod, hesitating to let it go. But he ultimately did when the operator was asking him what was happening. He returned to talking to them on the phone, explaining what he just did and the current state of the man on the floor. His fingers ran through his ebony locks as he got chewed out for what he was doing. Ultimately, he got off with a slap on the wrist, a warning for his actions, and the Schwarzwald pub was closed for the rest of the day. Police questions were a blur to everyone involved, and Isaac took it upon himself to walk mine home afterwards. Once the two of them had left, Maria and Gilbert were all that was left of those who had been inside. The police were still doing their investigation, but it was just them. They walked down the path that the police hadn't blocked off when Maria spoke up. So, Gil, that was something else. Gilbert laughed in agreement. This hadn't been what he expected from being out by himself. Yeah, that definitely wasn't on the top of my bucket list, having my friend get attacked, or having to deal with the attacker either, Gilbert admitted, running his fingers through his hair. Same. I just wanted to go sit at the pub during a quiet time and read. A devilish smirk crossed Gilbert's face as he turned towards her. You're a bookworm and a nerd? Maria laughed, playfully hitting him with her right hand as she held the book in her left. Speak for yourself, man, she yelled jokingly. You had a book with you, too! Gilbert laughed, a small blush crossing his face as he realized that she had, in fact, noticed that in all of the chaos. Maria's smile dropped, noticing his embarrassment, as she couldn't stand the idea that he thought that this was a poor trait to have. Jeez, Gilbert, she sighed. You remind me of an old friend, so let me be blunt, yeah? Gilbert braced himself for mockery, but he nodded, half expecting a laughing fest afterwards, when he felt a subtle tap on his head. He looked up to see Maria's book against his head, leaving him very confused until she spoke. I don't think that reading is stupid, and I won't make fun of you for it. Those who do that type of shit are stupid. And you haven't changed in mine eyes just because you read for fun. So stop that, yeah? Gilbert could see her smile genuinely after the book was lowered. This time, though, the smile sparked old familiar memories. Back in the day when he would practice with old Fitz and a friend of his that he suddenly could remember shared her name. He broke from the daze to reply to Maria, who had begun to get worried that she had said or done something wrong. You've got it, he said cheerfully. Maria grinned back, almost seeming to remember her own friend a little bit more. The two of them were going to talk more, and were even going to talk about memories about the friends they had just been thinking about, when their phones' alarms both went off. They stared into the phones, and their eyes collectively went wide. Scheisse! I've got to go! They both cried, only earning laughter amongst the two of them. Trade numbers? Maria asked, earning a strange look from Gilbert. Why? Gilbert asked pointedly. Maria blushed a little bit, feeling embarrassed at even suggesting that they do trade numbers. What? She said, looking away uncomfortably. I figured we still had stuff we wanted to say. Gilbert thought of his friend again, and it made him feel bad due to how mine had treated her, as well as how she had treated mine. Deep down, he knew he could trust Maria, and outside of the earlier events, he really couldn't pinpoint as to why that was. Gilbert sighed, before a teasing smirk crossed his face. Just as Maria was about to add something else in agitation, Gilbert held out his phone and said, "Just don't make me regret it, yeah?" Maria looked at his expression. Her embarrassment and frustration subsided with it. Shortly after swapping numbers, they went their separate ways, the both of them getting home just in time to take their siblings' dogs out for their midday walk. Over the next couple of weeks following the events, the two of them would meet up with each other on and off. They would share stories and even began helping each other with daily chores from both of their houses. And it was while making dinner one night at Maria's that Gilbert caught her reading a book. He'd seen that book with her on the day that mine got attacked in the bar, so his interest had been piqued. Since he was in her house, he did ask, "What are you reading, Frau?" A goofy smile crossed his face as he set a plate of food down in front of her. Maria shot him a fake glare. "Don't you Frau me, man! Ew, I take it back if you never call me man again." Gilbert laughed, sitting on the chair opposite of hers. Maria laughed back, nodding, neither of them taking note of the fact that their birds were getting along and playing together, nor the fact that their siblings' dogs had been doing the exact same thing this quickly. "It's weird," Maria answered his previous question. "This book is something I'm reading for answers." "Oh?" Gilbert asked, taking a bite of the meal he'd made for them. Maria nodded, setting the book down and following Gilbert's lead. "Yeah," she replied, swallowing the bite of food in her mouth. "There have been weird things that my Schwester and I have been going through, and it's had a semi-unrelated impact on work, so that's why her work meeting got moved up." Gilbert looked at her for a moment. He seemed a bit concerned, as she often spoke pretty highly of her sister. "Care to elaborate?" he asked, taking another bite of food. Maria smiled softly, concerned that he wouldn't even believe her. "It might sound insane. You sure you want to hear this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Gilbert wondered what she meant by that. Having gone through a few things with his own brother lately, he couldn't help but think he'd believe her no matter what she'd say. I've been going through my own insanity lately with my brother, so I don't think there's too much I wouldn't believe," he admitted. It seemed to put Maria at ease. "Okay," Maria said, feeling a little bit more confident. "It started with small things." As she began to explain this stuff, Gilbert's eyes would widen and shift expression as she explained each individual thing. When she brought up the strange dreams, when she brought up people attacking and showing up randomly, and eventually how it related to her work meetings, which then led her to explain the book she had. "So all this leads to this book. One of my Schwester's co-workers left a book behind. And when looking at it, it seems kind of nuts. But it talks about counterparts. More specifically, it talks about how the separation of them can affect the world that they both come from. And what can happen should said counterparts be forced apart via magical disturbance. The co-worker does know I'm borrowing the book, and this is where it gets a little insane. But I don't think that what is in said book is too different from what we've been experiencing." Gilbert looked a bit dazed. But not because he thought she was insane, but because he seemed to be uncertain as to whether or not her conclusion made sense. "Verdammt, I knew this would sound insane," Maria muttered, taking an annoyed bite of her food. "Nein!" Gilbert exclaimed, surprising Maria. "I don't think you're crazy. My brother and I were having the exact same problems. Dreams that seemed too real, and hearing about strange attacks like that. I'm not sure I agree on the answer, but I'm surprised it's not just us and our co-workers and immediate friends." Really? Maria asked, shocked by the turn of events. Gilbert nodded. The two of them resumed eating in silence. Neither of them were quite sure how to approach the revelation that they were experiencing the exact same problems. Once they were done eating, they both had a thought cross their minds. So, they both said in unison. Go ahead, please, Maria said pleasantly. Nine, Gilbert replied, raising his hands defensively. You brought this up first. Nine, I brought this stupid topic up. You go on ahead, Gil. Maria chuckled a little bit at their current argument. Gilbert raised an eyebrow, seeming to ask her if she was really okay with doing that, to which Maria nodded. So, Gilbert said, nearly laughing at the previous argument, this might be a bit invasive, so I apologize. But do you write in a journal every day? Like a diary? Gilbert blushed, realizing that he was admitting to a woman his age that he had a diary. Maria smiled softly, blushing herself, but she nodded all the same. Yeah, I do. But why? I mean, I might know why, but clarity would be nice. Gilbert nodded, clearing the awkwardness from his own mind. We both have been dealing with the same problems. And my thought is, if we look into those journals on the book, maybe I can understand what your conclusion is, and we can find answers together. Yeah? Maria brightly smiled. Yeah, that makes sense. Gilbert grinned, and then told Maria he would be right back. He ran home, not taking note of the distance the trip had taken, just like many of the other times he had taken that trip, from home or from the walk with the dogs. Or the fact that he had carried so many of his diaries, as the dreams often filled several pages of each book. Maria waited for him, her stack of journals being around the same height as his own. They both chuckled before reviewing the book Maria had borrowed from the coworker. Division of Responsibility, Gilbert muttered. A guide to balance through counterparts. Holy run-on sentence title. Gilbert, come on! Maria laughed at his joke. We need to focus! Gilbert smiled, wanting so badly to make more jokes, but nodding as they reviewed the book. When they went through it, they took notes of several important bits and pieces of information. Okay, Gilbert muttered. Memory dreams are common, but ones about future events seem to only really happen due to magical disturbances. And magical disturbances can only happen if a strong enough caster casts them or causes them. I can see why you assume that counterparts might come into play. Yeah, I thought this might be the case, Maria admitted. With the information, we should be able to confirm with our journals. Gilbert nodded, looking over at the large stacks of their combined diaries before sighing. He didn't even get the chance to complain about the stacks of journals before both of their phones rang. Probably your sibling, they both asked each other, followed by a chuckle. They both silently agreed to go talk to their siblings, going into the other rooms to talk with them on their phones. After entering the other room, they each answered the phone. Soon as Maria did, she spoke. Hello, Vest, how are things going? Mein Gott, danke for picking up, Monica exclaimed, sounding relieved. Did I do something wrong? Maria asked, worried. Nein, Monica exclaimed. Nein, I was just worried. You usually pick up a little quicker. Monica ran her fingers through her short blonde locks. Her eyes seemed to relax when the call had started. When Maria's laughter cut through the phone, she blushed. Who's the younger Schwester again? She asked jokingly. Monica got mildly annoyed, but remembered that she hadn't been at any of the meetings. When Maria noticed her silence, she began to get concerned. Okay, what's been going on? What did you find out? She asked, feeling the tension build deep inside. Then you didn't answer right away. I wondered if something had happened, Monica started, taking a breath before trying to figure out exactly how to explain the new information she had. Maria smiled softly. Worry still hid deep down, even through the phone. Look, whatever you have to tell me, I can handle it best. You don't have to handle this stuff alone. You know that, right? Monica hummed. Maria could already imagine her nodding like she would have any other time they talked like this. There have been members of that group that have been getting more and more bold. Monica began. They seem to have insider information on us, and they are more than willing to hurt whoever they want to get to us. I just didn't want to hear someone from that group on the other side of the phone and find out you were dead or... Nein, forget it. Maria sighed, semi-relieved but also a bit terrified. Well, at least I know that was one of them now. What do you mean? Monica asked, her tone becoming more cold as she spoke. Calm down. This was 2 weeks ago, Maria started, explaining the events that took place at Schwarzwald Pub and the help she had received from Gilbert. Monica remained relatively quiet as Maria spoke, only waiting till a few seconds after she was done to make sure she had finished speaking. What mine said about this Gilbert character was odd. Yeah, Maria admitted, not having thought about her comments about him since that day. And before you ask, no serious head trauma or a concussion based on what Isaac said. You may want to follow up on that, Monica added. And he's over right now? Yeah, he reminded me of a childhood friend of mine with the same name. Maria laughed sheepishly. Who knows, he could be my counterpart. Don't let that book get too far into your head, Monica warned. Even Elizabeth said the idea was far-fetched. Relax, Maria said bluntly. Without any proper evidence, I'm not going to go on in on that. Gilbert and I were about to test it against old diaries of ours. Apparently he and his brother have been going through something similar. Interesting, Monica said thoughtfully. So this might be affecting our citizens somehow. Unless your earlier joke was right. Maria hummed and thought. Maybe, either way. Monica started to laugh. Yeah, go back and talk to your boyfriend. And fill me in once or if you find anything. I've got to go. Maria could feel her cheeks burn with heat. Hey, she exclaimed. ist! The dialed tone cut her off as she blushed deeply. I am going to kill her, she muttered angrily. As she walked back into the living room, she saw Gilbert look like he was in the same mental space that she was. Dina Bruder war eine Schlampe? She asked, her voice shaking, trying to regain her composure. Ja, du auch? Maria nodded as she picked up their dishes and put them in the sink to clean up later. She continued to shake with rage. When she re-entered the room, however, Gilbert stood up and placed a hand on her shoulder. I know siblings can suck when they tease Mari, but it's okay. Let's just focus on figuring stuff out, yeah? Maria nodded, smiling softly as her shoulders relaxed. Yeah, Gil, you're right. Let's get started. Gilbert smiled as they went to sit back down near their piles of diaries and the book sitting in the middle of them. All right, Maria took a breath. How do we want to handle this? Do we want to take turns reading? And go over what that might connect to? Gilbert asked, quickly raising his hands in defense. Only if you want to, though. Maria chuckled, kind of understanding the awkwardness of it all. Plus, the idea of a guy requesting this of a girl. Sounds like a plan, she replied. Do you want me to go first? Gilbert was a bit dumbfounded by her response, laughing a bit at her boldness before nodding. Go for it, he said, watching her cross her arms in mock annoyance. Maria smiled, grabbing the first diary she had written when this all started. She quickly skimmed through to find the passage in her diary, and was surprised to find that it had started all a little over a year ago, not half a year like they had initially thought. "Huh," she said, still surprised by the information. "It's been going on this long." "Wait, what do you mean?" Gilbert asked, raising an eyebrow at the comment. "This shiza started back August 17th, 2020-something," she answered, a deadpan expression on her face. "So," Gilbert answered, kind of surprised, "this all started a little over a year ago?" "Hold on." Maria nodded, watching Gilbert skim through his own diary to check something. He seemed to stare blankly for a second or two before saying, "Same here. Kinda hard to believe it's really been going on that long." "So you did just say that." Maria smirked, nodding at the humor of it all. "Nothing wrong with sharing an opinion." Gilbert nodded and then added, "Go ahead, Mari." Maria nodded and began to read. Maria's diary. "Things have been weird lately. It's the anniversary of old Fritz, but this time it's not just his death that has me at a low point. It's the fact that I had a strange dream. I don't know how to describe it, but it was clearer than the day that it happened. More specifically, it was when he introduced me to Gilbert Beldeschmidt. It was on July 15th of 1763, and Gilbert teased me relentlessly. I thought that I was honestly going to hate his guts, but after a few sparring matches, and the fact that we never resolved things after we fought that much makes it that much more bittersweet. I wish Gilbert and I had never fought again after 2 months after his death, and I want to go back in time to fix things. But that's not how the world works. So for now, all I can hope is that old Fritz and Gilbert can forgive me. Well, it's getting long. I should write again later." Gilbert stared briefly, looking at his own diary to see he had almost the exact same passage on his pages. "Mine is almost identical, Mari," Gilbert said, not sure if he could believe his own vision. Maria blinked, almost wondering if Gilbert was okay, until Gilbert sighed and showed her his diary. When she read it herself, her eyes widened, and she began to look at Gilbert oddly as she asked, "But how? No one should be able to live that long unless you personify a country." Gilbert shook his head, unsure of what to make of it himself, as he didn't know, nor did he understand how Maria knew about personified nations. Maria sighed, comparing the journal entries to the book. "Okay, you next?" she asked hesitantly, as Gilbert nodded thoughtfully. Gilbert grabbed his journal back carefully and skipped ahead. As he did, he found a passage in his diary that was from December 25th. He skimmed it briefly to see what was in it before he began to read it. "Okay, then. Gilbert's diary. Today, my brother and I went to a Christmas party with co-workers and friends. It was really fun, especially when Arthur tried to beat Francois in a drinking game. Both of them ended up drunk off their asses. Either way. Shortly after the party, my brother and I took a nap, and then we helped with the cleanup. That was boring and all, but I had a dream again, and I'm glad I've been keeping note of them more since earlier this year. At any rate, it was in August, and about Maria Beldeschmidt and our first hunt together. Maria and I had been fighting over everything non-stop, so Fritz convinced us both to go with him hunting. And when we stopped paying attention to him, he'd hidden away somewhere. We fought over who chased him away until we were able to find a deer on our own. The two of us chased it for hours, and we were able to kill it together. So Maria was sad about it. She did seem to relax when we walked away. That had been one of the best times I'd had with anybody. I really wish I had found her again on the day she wanted to meet. I'm surprised I never wrote about her or this stuff before. Oh well, off to bed with me. Gilbert felt oddly sad and happy all at once. So did Maria, as her journal entry was nearly identical. When she showed it to him, he read the same words and his mouth fell agape. If this is the same, Gilbert stated, feeling a bit odd, then there might be more to that book, Maria continued thoughtfully. The two of them spent hours upon hours going through each and every journal, and each one they realized more and more that they were staring back at their old friend. And that they had been seeing each other multiple times throughout the passage of time. So you went through all of this too, Gilbert said, stretching in exhaustion. Maria could see the mixed expression behind it all. And to say she was feeling that too was an understatement. Yeah, Maria answered. So it seems we have a lot to unpack, right? Gilbert nodded, rubbing his eyes before saying, I hate to say it, Mari, but we need to get some rest first. Maria nodded, the two of them cleaning up and saying their goodbyes in an almost near silence. The night, or what remained of it, seemed endless until they both had one singular thought across their minds. It's still him or her. Deep down, I know it is. We just have a lot more to catch up on and a lot more in common than either of us ever thought. Maybe we'll see each other in the morning when we go to walk our siblings' dogs. The both of them were able to get decent sleep due to that thought by itself, and both of them still managed to get up on time to eat breakfast and feed the dogs before heading out the door. When they both left the house with the dogs, they saw each other down the street. This time, though, it felt a little bit familiar. Gilbert smiled and waved, and the two of them met halfway between the two places. Good to see we live on the same street, she said, laughed nervously, 3 leashes in her hand, and Marie Bird perched on her shoulder. Yeah, Gilbert laughed. Surprised we never noticed that before. Well, we have a lot of ground to cover during this walk. Where do we even start? She asked, not entirely sure where to start as she took lead. Gilbert laughed, following her lead calmly before he decided to break the awkwardness with a joke. For starters, do they seem to get just as excited as my little brooder's dogs? Should we walk the path behind our houses or the path along the forest edge? Let's walk the path behind our houses. Haven't done that in a while, she answered, grinning. Gilbert laughed, following their siblings' dogs as they sniffed and interacted with each other, as usual. You haven't changed a bit, Maria, he teased, causing her to look back at him in mock offense. Except for all the years that have been passing all this time, she said, looking back forward again before adding, And you still haven't told me why we share the same last name, Gilbert Beldeschmidt. Great minds think alike, I suppose, Gilbert answered back jokingly. He noticed her sadness when he asked, Should we start with what happens and how we may have missed each other after the death of Fritz? She sighed, nodding before speaking. We had that huge fight, didn't we? Like, I jumped into the fray to help in the fight, and then you got pretty pissed. Gilbert felt his smile drop as he answered sheepishly, Yeah, I was worried. That Arschlock almost killed you, and I didn't want to lose another lieber Freund that shortly after I lost him. I'm sorry. A long silence passed between them, as if the meeting they had tried to make happen all that time ago was finally happening now. Maria smiled, the sadness fading as she said the next thing in reply. I'm just glad I was wrong. I thought that you'd hated me, and... sorry. Gilbert and Maria remembered where this conversation came from, but both shook it off almost immediately. Gilbert watched Maria shuffle a little bit, a small tinge of pink on her face. I wouldn't hate you for that, Gilbert admitted, walking closer to her so he could be at her side. I guess I didn't need to be as worried as I was at the time. It was just not wanting to lose someone else that I was close to. Maria nodded, smiling, feeling a bit more comfortable after what he said.
It feels so stupid to be this sappy. She laughed out. That said, why do you think our leaders kept this stuff from us?
Gilbert shook his head. Not entirely sure himself, until one thing came to mind. As they began to walk again,
maybe it was to avoid conflict or protect us, though I think Fritz wanted to tell us at one point.
Yeah, that sounds like him, Maria admitted.
That said, we would have fought with each other over the rules and stuff like that at the time, so that definitely tracks. Where did you go that day, Mari?
Gilbert asked, changing topics to hopefully lessen the anger that conversation was going to cause. Maria laughed, knowing what he was doing, though she really didn't think that their conversation was going to get that heated over past events and gender roles.
I was there, she answered. I mean, I showed up. I could say the same thing about you, Gil. It felt like you were there, but I wasn't able to find you.
Gilbert smiled, nodding and looking ahead as they walked.
I was there too, Gilbert admitted. Though I felt the same thing, so... Magical disturbance? Maria asked. Now, I wouldn't normally jump to that conclusion, but... all of this seems like way more than coincidences, doesn't it? Gilbert asked, as they were about to cross a small stream.
Before Maria could answer, a bright light followed by a loud roaring noise cut between them. Gilbert reached out, trying to protect Maria and pull her close, but he blacked out, as did Maria before the world went silent and still. Not long after that, Maria had woken up. She freaked out for a moment when she noticed that they were in a wide open space that looked to be a gloomy gray color. There were no visible landmarks. There was no distinct ground, not even a distinct sky, and seemingly no life. The dogs and their leashes were gone, as were Marie Bird and Gilbert. Maria looked around for a moment and saw Gilbert just still lying asleep. She felt her body turn to ice with worry as she ran over to him and knelt down.
Gil? She asked, feeling frantic.
Gilbert! She began to shake him, earning her groans and begs for 5 more minutes. She started to laugh, as he obviously was fine, and she asked, Am I your mother? Gilbert's eyes snapped open at her comment, his face turning a bright red as he said, 9! Verdammt, Maria! Maria laughed a little harder, letting go of Gilbert carefully before she stood up to give him the room to stand. Gilbert shot to his feet upon realizing what his surroundings looked like. Where are we? He asked, clearly trying to stay calm. Maria's laughter suddenly halted as she sighed, her nerves returning. I don't know, she admitted, rubbing her arm a little. So that's why I got freaked out when you weren't awake too. Gilbert nodded, looking around the empty void for a bit with Maria. They both were unsure of what exactly they were looking for, but they hoped that it would be a way out. It was then that Maria spotted 2 people in the distance. Maybe we ask them?
Are you crazy, Mari?
Gilbert asked, clearly not trusting anything in this strange void. Maria glared at him briefly, but took a moment to collect her thoughts before she answered,
Look, I don't like it either. But we don't really have any other choice.
Gilbert sighed. It comforted him to at least know that she felt off about this too. And although he didn't like the idea of trying to talk to random strangers in an otherwise empty void, he shook his head.
All right then. But we leave if we sense any trouble, yeah?
Yeah, Maria said with a decisive nod. And with that, the 2 of them approached the 2 people in the distance hesitantly. Welcome to the end, Tesla Cats. This took me a little over 2 weeks to get done because I started recording this around the time that it was actually New Year's. The question still stands, how you doing? And if you're Hetalia fans, thank you for sticking around. Quick note, again, I am not a professional voice actor. So I apologize for butchering
voices. I apologize to those who are listening that heard me butchering German, because I literally did not remember how those were pronounced in the thing, and I had to look up at least one of them. But that being said, I hope you enjoy. I do realize, for those who might be reading along, that there might be some slight differentiations in how things are worded, and there's a reason. One, I just decided to improv certain things because I realized the wording I chose was not the greatest. So I will probably be going back through and revamping this chapter at some point. I just don't know if I'll do it right away, since it's, recording and editing this video is already going to be a lot. But I am open to answering any questions you guys might have about what this fanfiction is going to continue like, stuff like that. If you guys have any suggestions for later videos, I am more than open to it. I literally am just recording off of my iPad using voice notes and uploading those to Google and then editing them on my computer. So yeah. With that being said, I did realize I actually did have a full key at the end here of all of the characters and their names for the female personifications that I may or may not be using. This list may change and is subject to change at times, but let me know if you enjoy this so far, if you enjoy my insanity and enjoy me attempting to differentiate characters while I read. Oy vey. Anyway, let me go ahead and review that key. Maria Beldeschmidt, as you already know, female Prussia. Monica Beldeschmidt, female Germany. Chiara Vargas, female Romano or South Italy. Alice Vargas, female Italy. Mamako Honda, female Japan. Elizabeth Kirkland, female England. Amelia F. Jones, female America. Margaret or Meg Williams, female Canada. Francine Bonnefoy, female France. Anya Barginanskia, forgive me, I'm horrible with that name. Female Russia. Chanyan Wang, female China. I'm not certain on whether or not I'm using all of them or not, if I'm going to be switching up some characters, though I will say I've been getting more hyped to do later chapters of this, and I do have ideas. I will try to answer any questions you might have in the comments down below. And again, please be nice to me. I'm just trying my best. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to keep on keeping on, and I'll see you Tesla Cats and whatever the next video I have on this channel will be. Bye!